This is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy. Be sure to check out our blog and our YouTube channel, our podcast and our newsletter, and our great sponsors, Your Dolce Vita, Italy Rooting, Phil Italy, and Abiativo Casa. And my guest today is John Vallillo, who's just came back from a trip over there. So welcome, John. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Bob. I'm so glad to be here.
My pleasure. No, it's my pleasure. So before we talk about the trip and what you discovered there, when and why did you start doing your ancestry research?
Well, I think like so many of us who have grown up exposed to Italian traditions and um, other activities with relatives when you're young, it kind of goes away as you go to college or start a career or start a family. And that's pretty much what happened to me, that by the time I was well into my career and my kids were grown, the people that um, were influencing me when I was young were dying away. And when that happens, I think you step back a little bit and ask yourself, well, where did my traditions go? Where did I come from? And that happened right after my mom died in 2005. Um, I really started looking into her uh, family history, and particularly her dad was adopted when he was a baby. And so my next youngest brother, I'm the oldest of five, uh, he and I traveled to Washington, D.C., where her family originated, started doing some research there. And when I returned, I had the bug, right? I had to really start looking into all aspects of our family. And I was particularly interested in the Italian side. So 2005, 2006, I got some information about my great grandfather, Giovanni. And nobody told me when I was younger, but I suspect that I was named after him. And so I found out that he was buried close by in Cleveland, Ohio, where there was a large Italian community in a number of neighborhoods, not only what is known as Little Italy today in Cleveland on the east side, but there was at least three or four other Italian neighborhoods, depending on where you came from in Italy. The Sicilians went to one neighborhood, and the Moli, I guess it's Molisanis from Molise and Campobasso area went to the Little Italy area and neighborhoods in between. So I went to where my great grandfather was buried in Lakeview Cemetery, and I went to the front office and I said, I'm trying to find the headstone and the plot of my great grandfather, Giovanni Vallillo. I had the original spelling. And they looked it up and they said, well, we don't have Giovanni Vallillo here. And I said, well, do you have a John Vallillo? And they said, yes, we have John Vallillo with the last name spelled completely different with a Villillo. So I said, okay, where's he buried? And I went to his plot and found his headstone. And I think I did send a picture of that to you. Um, and it was spelled correctly. It was Giovanni, Vallillo. And so I'm thinking, so many people say that the names have been changed when people come through Ellis Island, which is generally untrue because there were Italian interpreters at Ellis Island, so they usually got the names right. Um, my last name was changed at a cemetery. Uh,
That's funny.
yeah, I think I have an interment record that I sent to you. It shows that the undertaker, the funeral home, had the name correct. But when it got to the cemetery, and the undertaker and the funeral home were in the Italian neighborhood. They were in Little Italy, so they had it right. But when it got to the cemetery, it changed. And I think because our family, as most were, illiterate, they couldn't spell, they couldn't write. They just assumed that that was the American way of spelling Vallillo. So they continued to use that spelling throughout the rest of their lives. So that was the start of it. I had to find out which ship that Giovanni came over on, which I found was the SS Critic. I think that's how you pronounce it. 1905, he came over. My great grandmother came over the year later in 1906 with two surviving boys. They had I think, five children since the time they were married in 1891, and three of them did not survive. So the two surviving boys came with my great grandmother, and her name was Clotilde. And then there's a long story that I'll get into later with her. But they came over in 1906. My grandfather Antonio was born a year later. Then the last child was my aunt Nancy. She was known as Annunziata. So that got me started. Uh, and coincidentally, there was an organization called Point, pursuing our Italian names together, that had a local branch in Cleveland. And I found out about them, joined the group, and they helped me with online research and finding more background information specific to my family. Um, that organization's still around. It's not, or Point is not around any longer, but the local group has evolved into CHOW, which is Cleveland Italian Ancestry Organization, and we're still going strong here in the Cleveland area. Um, that's how I got started. It's been a real fun ride, and I feel like everything that I discover, I feel like Indiana Jones. It's like I'm opening that golden box when I find out a new fact about my family. I luckily I think it's a website called ItalianGenealogy.com that I started posing questions about: how do I get this information? How do I uh, contact people in Italy to obtain documents, things like that? And I received a response from what turns out to be a cousin of mine who was in West New York, in New Jersey. His name's John Armelino, and John had uh, put together the entire microfiche that the family history centers had put or gathered over the last 50 years, that they've been going to all these towns in Italy and microfilming all the records. Well, he has that for Campobasso, where my family is from, the city of Campobasso. And I contacted him, and he said, "Oh yeah, I have your entire family tree." So lucky me, right? I was able to kind of shortcut a little bit of the research, and John was able to send me a lot of information going back to the 1700s. And then from that point, I started hiring local researchers in Molise and Campobasso to take it back even further. And now I think I'm back to the 1500s.
Wow, that's super. Now you didn't know he was a cousin before you started doing this, right?
No, no, he just
Yeah.
responded to my posts on Italian genealogy, and then we connected. I've visited with him a couple times over the past few years too.
Yeah, it's great when you find somebody uh who does all of that kind of stuff. A few weeks ago I interviewed somebody who's doing it for one of the towns in Puglia, and I think he said he's got 160,000 records if I remember right.
That's amazing.
It's just incredible.
It is, yeah. The file that John sent me has over 5,000 names in it, and in fact, when I went to Italy a couple of weeks ago, I took that with me, and I had the opportunity to meet with some cousins there, and I'd pull out my cell phone and bring up that file, and okay, this is how we are related. It goes back to this person, and that's fun.
Yeah, yeah, no, that is fun. And they're so great about it. They're I think sometimes they're more excited than us. My Molise connection is Capricotta. I go back many generations to there. So,
Another one of
um,
those mountaintop
yeah,
towns.
yeah. They're well known for. I guess I don't think the ski resort isn't in Capricotta, but not far away. They have and they get tons of snow. I had no idea how much snow they get there.
I think that was the town that was it a couple years ago got feet of snow in one of the storms, and that was worldwide news because people couldn't get out of their homes.
Yeah, they have. I'm not sure if it still operates. Um, they have this big giant snowplow that was donated by people here in America back in like 1950 or 49 or something like that. My daughter, they wanted me to go sit in it. I said, if I get up there, I'll never get back down again. It's like it's way up. Uh, but yeah, they get and they get it they get it early and they get it late. I mean, we were there in the summer and it was nice, and then by 6 o'clock the temperature must have dropped 15 or 20 degrees or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, but beautiful place, maybe like 1,000 people in there or something like that. Um, and what was crazy about it was um they we they had us go into mass. It was just at the end of the mass, and we went in, and the priest made this whole announcement about us going back, and nobody left, and then they wanted me to speak, and of course I have to speak in English, and nobody left. I mean, they just waited there for the whole thing. It was just amazing. And
Oh yeah.
uh, so, um, what was your experience like meeting all of these people and everything?
Yeah, it's amazing. Um, you feel a part of something. You feel at home. I first went 2 years ago, and it was a trip that was planned for 2020, and we were going to go in March, and everything shut down in March of 2020, and wasn't able to go then. But planned it again for 2022, and the plan was I was going to go with one of my brothers and with a friend of ours, and the day before we were supposed to go, my friend's brother got deathly ill. He had to cancel, and then halfway through the trip, I was going to meet up with my brother in Campobasso, and he got COVID in 2022. So I said, well, I'm going anyway. And I ended up going to Sicily. We have another friend that's part of this child group that wants to move to the Palermo area, and he was there. So I spent a week in Palermo. That's where I met Michael Cavallari and saw his movie in another mountaintop medieval village, and spent a week there, and then went to Termoli is on the Adriatic, about an hour east of Campobasso, and that's where, for the first time, I have met relatives that I have discovered through DNA research on my great grandmother's side, my bis nona. Um, and we met for the first time then. Uh, my my cousin owns a pastry shop in Termoli. And so, of course, I had to go there every day and have my cappuccino and my cornetto and talk with them, which they couldn't speak English. I couldn't speak Italian, but thank goodness for Google Translate, and we were able to communicate. And so this time, just a few weeks ago, um, I have developed more contacts, more relatives that are throughout Italy. I had a cousin that lives in Modena, I think that's how you pronounce it, near Bologna. And we met him for an afternoon when we were there this time, and just continued from north to south, meeting different people that I have contacted over the 2 years since I went in 2022, just by Facebook and other email and doing research. But um, it's just an amazing place. It's I tell people this is my third time that I have gone back. If you want to experience Europe, you can get a little bit of the German Swiss influence in Northern Europe. You can get some more, Greek or African influence out of Sicily. No matter what part of Italy you go to, you can get a little bit of different parts of Europe just in one country.
Yeah, yeah, that's true, and the food is different and all of that. I promised my wife, we're hoping to go again next year. I promised her this time though we're going to the north and going to uh Pisa and Florence and Venice and those places because we haven't been there yet. And I dragged her on two genealogy trips, so that's the deal if we go back.
Just to be able to go to the
Yeah, just be
normal tourist locations.
yeah, but I do have ancestors up there going back to the 13, 1400s, because of my grandmother's noble roots. I have from you know, uh Montefeltro and Gonzagas and all of the Este. So I'll squeeze in some of their castles.
Sure,
I won't
sure.
tell it till we get there.
Right, right. Oh, honey, we're going to a castle today. Well, okay. But it happens to be part of my family history, but
Yeah, yeah. I'll break that news when we get there. And I did the same thing. I was carrying around the family tree with me, everything, and she's like, "Don't take that out again. Nobody cares." I said, "But I care. They care.
yeah, yeah. And believe it or not, they care
They
too.
do. They do. It's um I think, I think that over the last few years, I think now they're starting to look a little bit different on it because of so many of us are going back. But when I started talking to people over there, maybe in earnest, maybe 6 years ago or 7 years ago, they really didn't pay that much attention to genealogy because they were in the same town for 3, 4, 500 years. They could go to the cemetery and see everybody, right?
They know
Uh,
their history.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Uh, but I think I think we're bringing them around a little bit. So now you said you had an interesting story about Clotilde. So what's that?
She, as many babies were in the 1800s, she was a proietta, an abandoned baby. And when I started looking into some of her documents, I saw in her obituary that um, one of the people that had died prior to her was claimed to be her brother. And so, how do you know if you're an abandoned child? How do you know who's your brother? And so I started contacting people with that same last name through Facebook and trying to find out if anyone knew more of this story. And a lady from Italy responded to me, and she said, try to bring it up on my screen. She said, it's definitely, we are definitely related because the story is um, there's a wealthy landowner in Matrice. Matrice is just outside of Campobasso that um, unfortunately had a number of servants, and um, the the rumor was that the wealthy landowner or one of his sons had children with one of the servants. And each time they had a child, they would take it to Campobasso, and there's a wheel where they would place the baby, and anonymously the nuns inside of the church, I think it was San Antonio Abate, it's one of the churches in Campobasso, would take the wheel, turn it, take the baby, and then give it to the mayor, who would assign the baby to a family to raise. And usually it was a couple, a woman that had recently lost a baby that could still provide nourishment to a newborn. So that's the story she told me. And so I had to find out the names of all of the children that um, supposedly were abandoned and taken to the same place in Campobasso, and started doing research. And again, this was like around 2010. I think before not Facebook, Ancestry started with their DNA program. Um, so I was able to develop a lot of documents that during their life, my great grandmother and this gentleman claimed that they were brother and sister. Well, I guess when you're growing up, you kind of know what the stories are, what the family stories are. Even if these children are being raised by different families, the word gets out, right? That they were probably brother and sister. So there were two boys and Clotilde. And one of the boys actually grew up to be the father of a very famous um, Italian singer who was the Frank Sinatra of Italy in the 1950s. And there's a statue to him in Campobasso. Um, so when we finally did uh, give a DNA sample, all these names started showing up that were connected through my dad, my grandfather, my great grandmother. And so, of course, I started contacting them. And over the years, we've kind of developed not who exactly who the natural father could have been or the natural mother could have been, but we kind of know that we're focusing in on the town and the families. So when I went in 2022, the cousins that I met in Termoli were from that research. And I went back again a few weeks ago, and we just had a wonderful time. And they accept the story. They know that that's likely what happened. Um, but it's interesting. There's there still seems to be not a caste system, but there is different economic levels in Italy that if you have something like this in your family history, they accept it, but they don't really want to talk about it. And so, my feeling is, look at us. We have succeeded in life. We've had good families. We've uh, had careers. We've been able to overcome whatever hardships they had when they were young in Italy. And so here in America, we're proud of that. But there's still a little bit of it of not shame, but just not wanting to talk about that type of situation when you're still there in Italy.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. And a couple of things. My wife's here her mother's and her grandfather, they used the name Poeta, Poetta, but when I got back to Italy, they were actually Proietto. So somewhere back then, they had the same situation with, I suppose, a wheel or whatever.
Right.
Um, and s- but it's probably so far back, I'll never be able to figure it out. But on my paternal grandmother, her father, um, in his birth record, he's listed as figlia naturale, um, which means he was illegitimate in some way, shape, or form. And what was interesting about it was I had some research done by somebody over there, and I refer to it as like a birth card. It's not the full birth record, which I have, but he came up with um, like an index card size thing. And it shows his father, um, Saverio, uh, and it has two different mothers on it. One card has one name, the other card has another name.
Hmm.
And when I was talking to my one of my cousins over there, the same thing. There's this rumor in the family that's somebody, because they were from a noble family. So somebody had a child with one of the servants. And so I could only guess that it may have been my great grandfather. Uh, he was never married this woman. Shortly thereafter that he did get married, and all the other children have her as the mother. So it's this big mystery, about my great grandfather. You know, it appears he was illegitimate, but somehow, I guess, because they were wealthy, they were able to, you know, make it look somehow that he was legitimate in some way, shape, or form. Uh, and but um, well, I'll never know what the real story was.
Right, right. Unless, like, in my case, you did the DNA through, Ancestry or My Heritage or other services, and what I did is hire a DNA expert to help me, and they were able to put together a really nice report and actually sorting out all of the matches that show up on your record, and how do they fit into your family tree. And without that help, it would have been almost impossible for me. I'd have to really study DNA and centimorgans and all the things that you need to do to be able to figure out things like that. Um, if you watch Finding Your Roots on PBS, one of the DNA experts they use is CC Moore, and it's her company that I hired to help do this, and they just really provided a lot of good information.
Yeah, and I was supposed to interview somebody from there on Saturday, and her dad, I guess, is very sick, and she had to take care of him. So I'm hoping to get somebody from there back on, or have her back on. It wasn't CC; it was somebody who works with her.
Yeah,
Uh, but I was very interested in what they do because of just because of that. And I have to ask you because you have a very interesting genetic chart, which I had never seen before. Um, so it says at the bottom, it says DNA discoveries. Is that through them or is that's something else?
that's through them.
Yeah, that's a really interesting chart.
Yeah,
So they build the chart based on the DNA. Yeah.
correct. And
Yeah.
the one name on the chart was the man that uh, my great grandmother claimed as her brother. And when um, I guess part of the story is when Giovanni, my great grandfather, came over, he not soon, but within a few years, developed tuberculosis. So he died in 1917. And in 1917, there was no safety net. There was no Social Security. There was no uh, financial support for families. So my great grandmother had to find somebody quickly that she could get married to, so that she would have support for uh, the kids that were still young. And so she married a man by the name of Rocco DeSantis. So Rocco was from Arce, I think, Arce, which is not in Molise, but he had come to Cleveland and he had had a couple kids and did not have a wife with him. So they married and they were able to raise the youngest, my grandfather and my aunt. And they are buried together. Rocco and Clotilde are buried together in Lakeview. Giovanni is buried in a completely separate part of the cemetery, which actually overlooks Little Italy. And then um, the brother of Clotilde, his name's Giuseppe Degnavivo, is buried right next to Clotilde. So I think that was another hint. They're buried right next to each other. They claimed each other as brother and sister. I pretty much accept the fact that that's what they claimed. And now with the DNA analysis, it brings everything together.
Yeah. And were they both, for lack of a better word, were they both abandoned by,
Yes, yeah.
yeah, they
So
were.
so Giuseppe was one of the three, and the other was his name was Bongusto. And if you know anything about the Italian music scene, Fred Bongusto was very famous in the 50s and 60s. And that was the son or grandson of the one who had been abandoned.
So now have, because one of the big problems that we all have, especially here, is the Italians don't do DNA, or not many of them anyway. Unlike the Puerto Ricans, my wife has 10,000 cousins. Every Puerto Rican in America has done their DNA. But now, have you been able to trace back to whoever this Randy guy was?
Yes, yes, we do know who that is. It's actually we know the family, and we know there were three or four sons that were the right age and capable of being this Randy guy. And it's funny when I started communicating with the folks in Italy and talking about this story, they gave me the name of a possible mother.
Hmm.
And when I went in 2022, I met up with one of the cousins that we had matched up with, and she took me to the wealthy family uh, cemetery. And one of the people that are buried within the crypt of this wealthy family is the same last name of the alleged mother.
Hmm.
So that's all kind of matching up too. So we may not know the complete story, but we're close. We're really close.
Well, I had that happen, you know, here. Um, I had somebody contact me. Um, we have both done, I don't know if it was, I think she did 23andMe and I had sent my stuff over there or something like that. Anyway, she contacted me because we were matched. Now I had no clue who she was, but we came up as, you know, second cousins. So I'm like, well, gee, I don't know. I said, but if you do Ancestry, you know, both sides of my family were on there, and you know, we may find out. But now, for like 2 or 3 months, I'm trying to like, okay, which one of my? I knew it had to be one of my first cousins, and I'm like, okay, which one of my first cousins is for had a child put up for adoption,
Oh yeah.
and yeah, so she did it, and it was a cousin on my dad's side, and all three of his children had done Ancestry.
Oh
So
wow.
it was an immediate,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Uh, so I contacted my cousin Donna and I said, "Have you seen?" And she said, "Yeah, I did." But she realized it wasn't the girl's fault. She didn't have anything to do with it. Um, so I don't know if they met in person. I know they've talked and everything like that. But I asked her, I said, "Did you have any idea? Did you?" And she said, "No." She said the only thing she could remember that when she was about 4 years old or so, that her mother went into the bedroom and was crying for like 2 weeks.
Oh my.
So obviously they knew something, you know.
Right,
Uh,
right.
and I have a very good friend who happens to be, my wife is half Sicilian, half Puerto Rican, and my friend he's Sicilian, and they're like fifth cousins. And my kids are adopted, and my son is my wife's fifth cousin through Puerto Rico. So, when you start, some people really, as you probably know, some people are really they don't want to know anything, right? And I'm like
Right.
just the opposite. I want to know everything that's going on.
Yeah, oh yeah. And once the truth gets out there, um, I think everyone likes the fact that, oh, I've got more family. That's good.
Well, yeah, my friend who's you know my wife's fifth cousin, he found an older brother that way that he never knew existed. Apparently, his father, he had a child. He had a child um, with somebody they think in the neighborhood in Brooklyn before he was married, and I guess I think he's about a year and a half older than Al, and yeah, he found out that he had a half brother.
That's
So
fantastic.
yeah,
This DNA stuff is crazy. My grandfather, full Italian, on the east side of Cleveland, somehow met a full German woman on the west side of Cleveland, from the German neighborhood. And so they got married and only had one child, my dad. So, like I said, I ended up being oldest of five. My Italian DNA has never shown up on any of the sites any more than 20 to 25% Italian. My next brother, who's 2 years younger, um, he just submitted his to MyHeritage and he comes back at 53% Italian. And it just blows my mind that from child to child, that type of difference in DNA.
I know, isn't that crazy? Did you ever hear of the I don't know if they call it's the jelly bean test or the jelly bean whatever. Uh, but if you put you know jelly beans in a jar, and then everybody, if you pick out, you know, uh, 23 or 46, and your brother picks out 46 and your sister picks out 46, that's going to be a completely different match. And that's,
Yeah, true. Yeah,
that's the easiest way that I've ever seen anybody describe it, right?
yeah, makes sense.
It doesn't have anything to do with it, with anything other than that. It's just the way the mix goes. And also, I've interviewed her a couple of times. But what people are starting to realize now, it's not just the physical characteristics that you inherit. You also, you know, it's also your, I guess your, traits, your, artistic traits or musical traits or, bad habits. You could be completely different than a sibling just
Right,
based on DNA alone,
right. Yeah,
which is, you know, pretty strange when you think about it, I suppose, right?
it really is.
So now are you the steward of all of this? I know I am in my family.
I am. I get to the point. I'm 68, and it's like, all right, I got to make arrangements for all of this stuff to be stored and passed on because yes, my one brother has interest in what I'm doing, but the rest are kind of ambivalent. The kids are not at the point they're like we were when we were in our 30s and 40s that we've got careers and family to worry about. But there may come a point in time where they want this information, so I'm going to make sure that I preserve it and it's available.
Yeah, I was just recently talking to one of my, oh, geez, I think she would be my second cousin once removed, I guess. She's in her late 20s, early 30s, probably early 30s, I guess. And I said, "Oh, good, you're getting all the stuff. You're getting, I'm leaving everything to you." I said, "Because you're the only one who seems to have any interest in any of this stuff." Um, so yeah, it's good to be able to do that. And the sad thing is talking to some of the people, because we had the same thing with the trip. We were supposed to go in April of 2020, and
Mm,
we had to postpone for 2.5 years. Um, but talking to some of the people over there, one of them told me that there was an uncle that had a whole bunch of stuff, and he passed away, and nobody knows what happened to it. Um, and then my dad's first cousin was actually younger than me. Long story there, but uh, his father uh, passed. He was in his 90s, who apparently knew the whole history of the whole family, and or his was it? Yeah, his father. Um, he knew the whole history of everything, and he passed away at like 92 and 93, just before I found Nicholas. And so it's sad. I mean, I think what I tell people now is if you have grandparents that are still alive and you're just starting out, everybody's got a camera on their phone. Go videotape all of this stuff and
yeah,
and save it. We didn't have that opportunity with our, you know, even our parents, right? You couldn't do
right,
that.
right.
So
I tell everybody, if you still have grandparents alive or great grandparents, sit down and record those stories because those stories will disappear when they disappear, and it's something that maybe your kids or your grandkids would like to know about. So do it now. Don't wait. And I am trying to piece together this family history from a blank sheet, and it's a lot of work. It's fun, and it's great when you discover things. But it would have been so much easier if I had had those stories before everybody was gone.
yeah, and my one of my cousins had the foresight to um, interview my uncle in Barres before he passed away, because they lived there until 1950, and so it's a he he said he had it on tape. He said I never translated it. I never really wanted to go back and hear it, and I told him, I said, you have to translate. You have to do this for the family and everybody. So finally he did it with his sister, and it was such a great insight into uh Torito Bari and from like 1920 through 1950. And to your point about the caste system, I mean, my mother's family, they were farmers. And in it, my uncle says that when he met my aunt, he wanted to marry her, and the family said no because they were a little bit of a station ahead.
Right.
And he went in the army, and when he came back, they allowed him to marry her. So maybe they were running out of men in the town.
Or
Who
the
knows
fact that he
why?
served in the army, maybe
Yeah.
that gained some respect because of that, and that's all they need. They just need a little bit of a sign that okay, you're acceptable, so you're fine for for our daughter. Um, Kind of going back to uh, recording the family history and trying to find resources on this trip a few weeks ago. We met one of my cousins in Siena. We were there to see the polio, and he's actually from Campobasso, but he had moved to Siena to work in a wine shop right on the piazza. It overlooks the piazza. So we're talking with him, and talking about family history and connections, and he said, "Well, there's a book about our family that sits in a home in Campobasso that's been empty for 2 years because the person that lived there, one of the Vallillo family members, passed away." And I guess he tried to get the book, but the family would not part with it yet. They're still going through what they're going to do with the property and the possessions. So this book is sitting in this house. I said, "Well, I've got to see that. I've got to photograph it or something." He said, "Well, I'll try to make arrangements, and I know that there's somebody that can get access to the house." Well, that's great. And later on in the trip, I met another cousin in Campobasso. We were just sitting having a glass of water in the afternoon, and I mentioned this book. He said, "Oh, that was my uncle so and so who passed away. I know about that book, and I'll make sure that you get photos of it." So it's just making those types of connections.
Yeah, well, there are no accidents. I'm a firm believer in there's no accidents. These things are meant to be somehow.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly, exactly.
I found my cousin Chincy just, by accident kind of. But I've heard so many, stories like that where something just pops up, and that's why I tell people. I said, sometimes you need to walk away from it for a month or two and clear your head. And I said, when you come back, you're gonna find something that you never saw before.
Right, right.
It just shows up. I don't know. I don't know how, but it just shows up.
Yeah,
Um, uh, well, listen, John, this has been a lot of fun, and I enjoy all of this stuff. I love hearing the stories because while all our stories are similar, there's always that little twist in there that somebody didn't know about.
exactly. And if any of this information can help someone else take the next step or think outside the box, this is exactly what this whole show is about.
Yes, and yeah, exactly, and that's the point.